But speaking of money and cinematic universes and themes, the Chosen. So this is like things might not be going well for Marvel or Pixar until Inside Out 2, or Disney, but things are going well for Jesus and his disciples.
That's
At
true.
least their cinematic equivalents. Because we actually talked about, I think we looked it up, one was like about a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
It was
March of 2023.
on one of the previous iterations of this, the Collision Live for you old timers. Like we talked about, there was rumblings of like a Bible cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Which I mean, on the surface, makes me cringe a little bit. But sort of this idea that the Chosen's doing so well, faith-based in general is doing well. Like you're gonna see, kind of like what we were just talking about, money matters, or at least success matters, and like things do well. It's like, hey, this did well. Why don't you have 10 of them? Sort of the mindset.
What could go wrong?
And that seems to be the case with kind of another 2 for 1, because there's two. One about the Chosen, one about the Passion of the Christ. We can kind of treat both those maybe together. But it was just sort of announced at, I think it was called like the Chosen Con. If you want to know how successful your show is, when you have your own
con.
We're just centered on your one show that you have. That's pretty crazy. But where they announced a new kind of studio from the creators of the Chosen, Dallas Jenkins, 5 and 2 Studios, which I didn't look up. I'm assuming that's some biblical.
I'm thinking 5 loaves and 2 fish.
That's probably what it is.
I feel pretty smart.
More well versed.
Because I was like, "What is that 5 and 2?" I was like, "Oh, I'm sure that's."
Yeah, that's gotta be what
100%.
Take it to the bank.
5,000.
So the indie studio plans to produce Bible inspired stories through uniquely human and authentic storytelling and audience engagement, which is actually quite vanilla of a mission statement. But they did announce maybe more exciting, especially if you're a fan of The Chosen, kind of like their slate of shows coming up. So I thought we could kind of walk through some of these and then what we're excited about. The first one is The Chosen Adventures, which I think is going to be the next thing that comes out, sort of following after The Chosen. They're going animated with it, where this is like an animated kids show of Jesus wandering in the wilderness, and he meets kids, which I think is like one of the first. I've only seen some of the first season of The Chosen, and one of those probably the best episodes is like Jesus in the wilderness, and there's kids, and he's interacting with them. I think it's like episode 2 or 3 of the show. It seems like it's gonna be an animated version of that, like just Jesus interacting with kids, kind of in animated. And somewhere says, Jenkins says, without there's something there, seeing Jesus through the eyes of kids. We're not going to expand on that, the mothership show. But if we took time with that, an animated show that was witty and fun and adults can appreciate, we really wanted to get that right. And he kind of talks about how it's not going to necessarily just be like super kiddie, but just, something that kids can enjoy. So that's the one show. Another one, unscripted show, The Chosen in the Wild with Bear Grylls, kind of a 6-episode like live TV. I think Jenkins and then Bear Grylls essentially sort of do like a Man vs. Wild or whatever, but somehow related to The Chosen. I don't a baptized version of that, which again, Bear Grylls is a Christian. If you've follow his life and ministry or shows or whatever. The other show, a couple shows they announced. One, I think after The Chosen finishes, so the next sort of flagship show they'll have is about Moses. They didn't say a name, just that it's about Moses. That's going to be like a 3-season run, kind of following the 3 stages of Moses' life. And then they briefly mentioned an Acts of the Apostles show and a limited series about Joseph. So maybe we'll talk about this first, then we can just mention, or do you want to talk about the Passion?
We can talk about this first, and then we'll move on to, I think, the Passion stuff, because I feel like they are somewhat different.
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, they're different. Share some Venn diagrams, but they're
there's some overlap for sure.
What are some of your thoughts? One, just in general about this whole
I'm not
Chosen universe, and then 2 about the specific shows.
I'm not at all surprised, and there was like a bunch of drama too with like Angel Studios and The Chosen wanting to break off, and it's like, okay, now The Chosen makes its own studio because it wants to make a biblical cinematic universe. I don't think any of that is surprising. Again, it'll just be one of those, like, let's wait and see. Like, I don't want to, like, get my hopes up about shows, especially with, like, tackling, like, biblical narratives, because I feel like those can, there's not a lot of, like, middle ground with those. I feel like they're either good or really bad and, like, cringy. And so, I think we'll wait and see. I don't know. Like, I may be interested, but I'm not just like, wow, Can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to if it's good, like you said. Like,
Yeah, like
I think I'm somewhat indifferent to this. Like, I'm not a big Chosen person. I'm not an anti-Chosen person.
yeah,
It just doesn't. It has never excited me. And I watched most of the first season.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay. Like it's not bad. Like it's definitely.
No.
I can see why people like it. It's just it doesn't interest me. Like I don't.
yeah,
It's not necessarily exploring things, and I do have some. I don't know. There is some at least mild ickiness to me about, or just unease about like Jesus portrayed in a fictional way.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know, giving lines of dialogue to Jesus and things like.
well,
I just
and
feel
that, yeah, and it maybe the most squeamish thing about it is the Jesus and the Kids animated series, because I just feel like, okay, where's that? Where are you gonna go with that? And like, are you just gonna be like, I don't
yeah,
know,
because that's off the book. Because you don't get
Right,
you don't get
right.
those stories in the Bible.
And so to me, I was like, I don't know about that. Who doesn't love Bear Grylls? I think, I don't know, like, is it going to be like a...
That one just strikes me as like a, sort of like you guys liked High School Musical, we got Sunday School Musical. It's like, there's always sort of that show, but like,
Yeah.
this one's going to have the maker of The Chosen. And I don't know, maybe they're going to talk about like, this is sort of like when John the Baptist was in the, like, I don't know if they'll tie it in that way or if the only catch is like, it's the same show. It's just, this one has a Christian on it. And it's like,
Okay.
I don't know, like we sort of already have unless it's like very different.
I mean, yeah, I wonder if it's more like, if there's going to be more like life lessons doled out from Bear rather than just like survival tactics, like, because I could see him doing, Bear Grylls all his life. He, I don't think he really got to share much of his personal.
Yeah, this would definitely give him the opportunity.
So I'm betting this is like
Christian,
right? Yeah,
and they allow that to not get edited out.
Yeah, I could see this being like, hey, you can bring in a lot of like life wisdom and Christian wisdom into these circumstances of survival and being out in nature and stuff, which I can appreciate nature, but it's But yeah, it is one of those, like, is it going to just be like a...
Yeah, that one's the least exciting to me.
Yeah.
The Moses one is probably the one...
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the Acts, but that intrigues me the most. Because I do think there is so much potential in, like, telling biblical stories well.
Yeah.
And, like, helping people see the Bible stories from a different perspective. And like, by making it about Moses, I mean, you still have... I'm sure, God will be speaking through burning bush. Like, unless you're just pulling from Scripture, like... It at least dances around the areas that I'm not sure about with The Chosen. With like,
yeah,
it's different to me to like add, to make up storylines and subplots and dialogue for Moses than it is to like speak on behalf of Jesus. Like to me, that not even that's necessarily can't be done.
And that's why, like, I don't know. That's why I think the last time we talked about this, when we were talking about sort of the biblical cinematic universe, is like, I think the interesting thing is to just place interesting stories. They could be totally made up, but like have a story about a family that leaves Egypt, and it's like at a distance, yeah, this is us, this is our exodus, but it's about this family, or this, you could have several like offshoot. I mean, it's totally like made up storylines of these people, but it's like this could be what some of these people went through as they're following this crazy guy Moses, through the, like, so I think
see the Bible stuff through the eyes of someone else rather than through the eyes of.
So I just think that gives you way more creative freedom and to tell really interesting stories without kind of having to pin yourself into like, this is the like, you can have the Bible narrative, you can kind of see it going past, but the story is,
because even like the Joseph one, like, I mean, I guess it depends on what Joseph they're talking about, but like if it's like the father of Jesus, like I don't know about showing like a baby Jesus.
Oh, I was thinking it would be like Joseph, like
coat of many
colors thing.
Which I'd be okay with that. Like I don't know. It's the being around the Jesus stuff that I don't know about. But I think they have a track record to show they can do this well.
Yeah.
I think they have the money to do it well. Speaking of money, sort of the other thing, we don't need to spend really any time on this, but just like it does seem as they're expanding. Like I think we've got accustomed to sort of The Chosen is like it's a show, but it's kind of a missional show.
Yeah.
Like it's free. You can watch it on any app and stuff. Where it seems like that's not going to be the case for this new like. It's more they're going to be pitching this to like Netflix and other places, and they talk about if we can find takers, like they're going to find takers because the
Yeah.
Chosen is bigger than any of the stuff that the other studios are doing. Like, I don't think that's going to be the problem.
Right.
So it is going to lose. Like, I guess it's to not lose sight that this is still a business. Like,
Yeah.
I think the people making it, I think, have the right heart, and I hope, and will do. They even say in the interview, like, they're going to go out of their way to try and make this available and missional still. It's just that it's also going to be very much a business run by money and things,
Yeah.
which maybe, I don't know if that takes some of the shine off of it, but I think it's also just a reality of the situation. Kind of the other related thing for, this biblical stories and, the explosion of that is there's some new reports. These things have been floating around for a while, but this one seems like it's legitimate that this is actually happening. No, not just the hype. And that is The Passion of the Christ 2. The sequel to Mel Gibson's The Passion, which I forget what year that came out in. Like, it's been a long time since that.
It's been like 20 years.
Yeah, like 2004 or something. I don't know. I know it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But the reports are that Mel Gibson, he's been like scouting locations, and that production is expected to start in 2025, so next year, which means the movie probably will come out in 2026. So it's still on the horizon, distant horizon, but it's coming closer because we're actually getting close to this. And,
near future.
And I've seen interesting people are really excited for this movie. I think the working title, I think, is Passion of the Christ: Resurrection, which was one of the big critiques for the Passion movie, is that it's like it's the Passion, it's the crucifixion, and then you get like a little end, a couple seconds of like the tomb opening and the light, and then it's done. You don't really have it's a partial story. I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's
it's a part one for sure.
Yeah, it's like not even like a sequel as much as it is like you sort of need both those together. And it's like Dune Part 1, Part 2. Like, you like cut it in half, and then they haven't made the second half. So that part does excite me. That I think which I've shared before, like, I'm not crazy about the Passion movie. I haven't seen it for a long time. And one of the reasons I'm not is that I feel like it lacked the spiritual element. Like, it very much was just like, let's sort of shock people with the violence, especially at that time it was made.
And the gore.
And the gore, and just like, like you almost feel like you're getting beaten up in this theater as you're watching.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of designed to make you feel bad. Like, isn't it awful, like how much physical pain Jesus suffered for you? And which is true. Jesus suffered a lot of physical pain, but like it wasn't able to convey anything about like the spiritual, like actually bearing the sins of the world, like what I think are like the bigger, pain, like the bigger sacrifice that Jesus made.
Right.
So I do think that's exciting. Although, and this isn't a recent interview, but some of the insight that if you can pick, as Gibson has talked over the years, apparently one of the holdups for the movie has been trying to decide well, how do you do that? There's a reason maybe they didn't do that in the first movie. They didn't know how. In 2022, he had an interview Gibson did, where he said this. Said, it's not a linear narrative. You have to juxtapose the central event that I'm trying to tell with everything else around it in the future, in the past, and in other realms. And that's kind of getting a little sci-fi out there. It's a big story, it's a difficult concept, and it's taken me a long time to focus and find a way to tell a story that really delivers. And then later he goes on to say, describe the project as an acid trip, fueling online speculation the sequel will have a supernatural focus. That doesn't excite me at all.
No?
I would even go as far to say that that's like anti-excites me. That repels me. I don't know. Like I don't think of like the resurrection and think like, you know what this telling needs? It just needs to be a bit more like psychedelic.
Yeah.
It needs to be a little more, we need a bit more sci-fi.
A little trippier.
In our, resurrection story. And they talk about some of the speculations that it will play off, which is more like a Catholic theological thing about like Jesus like actually descending and expending those 3 days in hell, which again isn't really a biblical concept.
Yeah.
It's more traditional, like where was he in those 3 days? Like, I guess he must have been in hell. And like that maybe that's what the story will do, and you're gonna see like, so I don't know. Like I wasn't necessarily super excited. I think it's a powerful story, and obviously like to have out there. I don't know. Like, are you?
Yeah.
Are you excited for sci-fi resurrection?
Not really. Not particularly. It's one of those things that it's. I think like, depending on what resurrection story are you trying to tell, and I think that will speak to a lot of whether or not it's going to be worthwhile. And I think if it's just sort of like the harrowing of hell story, then maybe not so much. But I think there is a lot that you could do. Like, we do know a lot of what Christ did after the resurrection. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that you could do as he's coming back to the disciples after the resurrection and those 40 days, which I think would be I think it could be a very interesting story and a very interesting movie, but it doesn't seem like that's the direction
Yeah, I'm just not
that
sure
old
how
Gibson
you
is going to go with this.
If you sort of focus more on like almost like the Acts, like the disciples and the power of God poured out and like God appearing, so that so much of that, the part of the story they seem to be covering, isn't known really. Like what he was appearing to people. Like I know you need to add some sort of like tension and cinematic stuff, and it just seems like the ways that they're at least initially been thinking of doing that isn't what I want to see. And but I will definitely be interested in seeing
but
what they
it could
do
be added to the pantheon of biblical cinematic universe movies.
Yeah, and if you don't like that, then The Chosen will probably have a couple of shows centered on those things. So we have more options than we did back when Mel Gibson was first doing that. I was checking out.